بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيد الأولين والآخرين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. For the author in his first chapter of Kitab al-Tahara began with Bab al-Miyah, the chapter of water, different types of water and so on. And a brief summary, we said the first 4 or 5 ahadith show that water does not change and does not become impure unless it's changed by an impurity. It changes taste or color or changes smell. This is if the water is in large amounts. And if the water is in small amounts, then it affects the water immediately, according to the majority of fuqaha. And the second opinion is that the only concern is change. So we have 2 opinions. One says we have to distinguish between large and small amounts of water, because the Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلِ الْخَبَثِ. If water reaches قُلَّتَيْن, a quantity of water, you know at that time, it doesn't carry the impurity. It doesn't carry the impurity. Which means what? If it's less than that, does it carry or not?
Yes.
It means it carries. And like we said, this is the opinion of the 3 Imams, other than Malik, Abu Hanifa, Al-Shafi'i and Ahmed. And there's no harm if we try to always link the ahadith and the understanding of the ahadith to what we took in Umdat al-Fiqh. And that way we have the ahkam, and at the same time we have the evidences for those ahkam. And it's well known that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala, was an ocean in knowledge. An ocean. And some of them said, if you saw Ahmad ibn Hanbal, it was as though he was given the knowledge of those who came before him, and the knowledge of those who came after him, all displayed in front of him, and he chooses from it whatever he wishes. And so his knowledge of hadith was vast. And his son says, كَانَ يَحْفَظُ أَلْفَ حَدِيث. He knew 1,000 ahadith, which is what? A million ahadith. Not all of the ahadith are from the Prophet ﷺ, because as far as I know, there's not that many ahadith in the first place. But narrations from the companions, narrations from the tabi'een, and different narrations per hadith also. And there's no doubt that following someone like Ahmad in his understanding of the texts is better than following somebody who is lower than him in knowledge. And this is something that is common sense. If you ask someone who is lesser in knowledge or more in knowledge. Someone who's more in knowledge, especially when the difference between Ahmad ibn Hanbal and many others. Of course, that doesn't mean, and here's an important distinction, that doesn't mean that a person claims that Ahmad or any other Imam is infallible. That's not the claim, and this is a big misunderstanding. No, but a person who isn't a person of experience in the study of fiqh, or is a beginner in the study of fiqh, does he make his own ijtihad? That's haram by ijma'. By ijma'. So what's he required to do? Ask the scholars by ijma', by consensus, wajib for him to ask. And we saw some examples. How does a person know whether a hadith is authentic or not? How does a person know whether a hadith is general or not, specific, and so on. Anyways, of course, that doesn't mean if there's an opinion which some of the later Hanbalis chose that is stronger than the madhab of Ahmad, we'll mention that. And sometimes if the difference of opinion is strong, we'll mention that opinion, those opinions as well, just so there's an understanding. Or if people are used to a certain opinion, we'll mention the other opinion also, so that there's some clarity in that regard. So is that clear? When water is in large amounts, what's large? Qullatayn or more. Qullatayn or more. Roughly equivalent, they say, to about 200 litres. Even though some of them say it shouldn't be measured in litres because it's a case of length. But anyway, if it's a large amount of water, we look at what? Has it changed, yes or no? That's the question. If it's a small amount, do we look at change? We look at whether there's an impurity in it or not. And one of the proofs for that also is the hadith of the dog. If the dog drinks from one's vessel, what's required? Washing how many times? 7 times. The first one with soil. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say whether the water changed or whether it didn't change. Wash it immediately. Is that going to clean the socks? Maybe it was 2 pots, 2 qullatayn of water, and the dog came and drank from it. Would that require 7 washes? No. Okay. We said the washing, we said the saliva of a dog is najis, according to the majority. His body, according to the majority, is najis also. If it is wet, and we said the qa'idah was, who remembers? Massu طاهر بلا خلاف. مسُ الجاف للجاف طاهر بلا خلاف. Something dry, touching something dry is pure by consensus. If a pig is pure and it touches your clothing and rubs off against your arm and clothes and so on, does this require washing? No, it doesn't require washing. Your clothes are dry and the pig is dry. There's no effect. There's no effect. But let's say it was wet, in which case that would have an effect and it would stay. Sheikh Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah, he says the saliva is pure, is najis, but the body is pure. The saliva is najis, but the body is pure. Because the Prophet ﷺ asked to wash from the saliva, not from the body. And that's the Hanafi opinion also. So these are the 2 common views. That it's only saliva, and the other one says body and saliva. Okay. We also spoke about the issue of sea animals being permissible, halal to eat, regardless of what they are, on the condition that they are what type of sea animals?
Ones that live in the ocean all the time.
Ones that only live there. Ones that only live, not sometimes they're in the sea, sometimes they're outside. Okay. He says, rahimahullah, Babul Aniyah, chapter number 2. Babul Aniyah, utensils. عن حذيفة بن اليمان رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تشربوا في آنية الذهب والفضة ولا تأكلوا في صحافها. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says, do not drink in silver or gold utensils, and do not eat in those plates, in those trays made of those things. Why? He says, فَإِنَّهَا لَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَلَكُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. It's for them in the dunya. Who's them? The disbelievers. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. It's for you in the akhirah. And this is an indication that the punishment in the akhirah very often is of the same type of the sin committed in the dunya. One who drinks wine in the dunya, for example, is prohibited from it in the akhirah. One who does X, Y, Z in the dunya is prohibited from it in the akhirah, and so on. And this is why a person, as much as possible, may Allah forgive us, has to think, if I do X, Y, Z now, do I want to be prevented from that same thing in the akhirah? And the answer is no. That small amount of pleasure or sin, whatever it is, equivalent to the akhirah is nothing. It means nothing. But a person has to weigh up sometimes. All the time, not sometimes. All the time. Okay. Here, this is the first hadith in Sahih, in Bukhari and Muslim. The following hadith is the hadith of Salama رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي يشرب في إناء الفضة إنما يجرجر في بطنه نار جهنم. And this hadith is also in the Sahihain, Bukhari and Muslim. The one who drinks in silver utensils is only swallowing the fire of hell in his stomach. So it's a severe prohibition on using utensils, silver and gold. Silver and gold utensils. Why does the author mention it here? If this is eating and drinking from gold utensils, silver utensils, what's food and drink got to do with tahara? These are the first two hadith of the chapter. What's the benefit of it? Why is this whole chapter in here anyway? Utensils. Where's water carried? There. That's where water is carried. So a person makes wudu, maybe not as much in our time, but a person makes wudu, water needs to be in some kind of container. So the author wants to clarify the use of these containers. What kinds of containers can you use to make wudu from? And the majority of scholars say the prohibition here of eating and drinking from utensils spreads to all kinds of prohibitions. All prohibitions. So the use of gold and silver is prohibited altogether. A general principle, according to the majority of fuqaha. It's important to understand this principle. So the majority of fuqaha are of the opinion that the use of gold and silver is prohibited generally. One exception is beautification for women. Beautification for women is the exception. And the other exception for men is several things using silver. All cases of necessity, but cases of necessity are a side thing, such as someone has to have a gold tooth. Has to be gold, nothing else. There's no other way of something being fixed, something else will rot, another material will rot or harm his gums or whatever. It has to be gold, it's the only thing that works. Or it has to be silver, it's the only thing that works. Then a person uses it, no problem. And the ring is an exception with many fuqaha. Silver ring for a man. And some of them say there's another exception in the sword, because that was done by some of the companions. You were going to say something?
Is that referring to the tooth?
Hey, the tooth is a case of necessity only. Not as some people think, you can just have it. Silver, for men, any silver is allowed. No, that's not the case. Not any silver is allowed for men. Only certain things there are exceptions, such as the ring, like we said, and cases of necessity if required, like the hadith of the nose, the person whose nose was damaged and he replaced it with gold or silver. Gold, I think. Replaced it with gold. He replaced it with silver, then replaced it with gold after that, when he saw that worked. This is mentioned by Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi rahimahullah, from the jurists of the Hanafi madhab, and al-Buhuti al-Hanbali rahimahullah, and Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah al-Hanbali. And he says rahimahullah Ibn al-Qayyim, وَلَا يَشُكُّ فِي هَذَا عَالٍ. And no scholar will doubt this ruling, that the prohibition of using utensils, gold and silver utensils, is not just for food and drink. Some scholars say that. Only food and drink is not allowed. Other uses are allowed. And from the most famous of the contemporary scholars who says that is the Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. But the majority of scholars, like we said, say all of it is prohibited. All of it is prohibited. And we mentioned the statement of Ibn al-Qayyim. And from the contemporary Hanbalis, who also say everything is prohibited in terms of gold and silver, is the former Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdulaziz ibn Baz. And Sheikh Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman bin Jibreen. And from today, Sheikh Saleh ibn Fawzan, al-Fawzan. Anyways, like we said, this includes what? Like al-Buhuti says, rahimahullah, this includes gold or silver pens. They're included in the prohibition. Gold or silver curtains, gold or silver doors, gold or silver watches, etc. What's the exception is beautification for women. Beautification of women. Is the use of gold and silver utensils allowed for women? No. Gold and silver utensils are not allowed for men or women. The only thing that's allowed for women is that for beautification purposes. Okay. Is that clear in that regard? Okay. عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دبغ الإهاب فقد طهر أخرجه مسلم. when the animal hide is tanned, it becomes purified. That's the first hadith. The second hadith, which is linked, وعن سلمة ابن المحبب رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دباغ جلود الميتة طهورها. The tanning of a dead animal's hide is its purification. Okay, so the animal's skin, its purification is, what do you do to it? Tanning. Yeah, I don't know the exact process of tanning, but they say use of material and use of water to wash off, to purify. Salt and water.
Yes.
Salt and water. Okay, so it's tanning, use of salt and water, and perhaps other materials mentioned by some others, in order to purify these skins. Because we said the dead animal is tahir or najis. Najis. That's the general principle. It's najis, except two, which sea animals and what's the second dead animal? That's tahir. Insects. Okay. ما لا نفس له سائلة. ما لا نفس له سائلة. Anything that doesn't have a runny soul, they say, as Ibrahim al-Nakha'i says, rahimahullah. So it doesn't have blood. You squeeze it in. There's no runny blood like with standard animals. These are the two things that are pure when they're dead. Even dead are pure. Everything else is najis. Even animals that we eat, sheep, cows, chickens, and so on. Yes, if they're dead, that's najis. Yeah? Dead meaning what? Dead alone. Doesn't mean we slaughtered it. Slaughtering it otherwise, how can we eat it if it's najis? When we say dead, it means dead. It died alone. Died in another way other than slaughtering. The third hadith. We'll read the hadith that are related together. Then we'll go through the rulings, so that we don't talk about rulings, then talk about the hadith afterwards. And Maymunah radiallahu anha. This is hadith number 18, according to this copy that I have here. قالت مر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بشاة يجرونها. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم passed by a dead sheep that they were dragging. فقال لو أخذتم إهابها. He said it would have been better had you taken it to hide, made use of its skin and so on. قالوا إنها ميتة. They said it's a dead animal. فقال يطهرها الماء والقرض. He said water and leaves of the, how do you pronounce this word? Who has the copy? Acacia? As a guess? Yeah. Okay, it's a type of tree. It will purify it. Okay, water and this type of tree, plant, leaf will purify the dead skin. This applies to which dead animal? The dead animals that are permissible to eat. Dead animals that are permissible to eat, such as sheep, as in the hadith, cows, camels, and so on. Does it apply to a dog? No, it doesn't apply to a dog. If a dog we can't make pure in its life, how can we suddenly make it pure when it's dead? How can it apply to a pig? If we got a pig and washed it 1,000 times, does it become tahir? No. Still najis. It's still najis. For how suddenly now it's died, it's become even more najis, suddenly we can purify. This applies only to animals that are permissible to eat. وعن أبي ثعلبة الخشني رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله إنا بأرض قوم أهل كتاب. Abi Tha'laba radiallahu anhu says, O Messenger of Allah, we're in the land of people, Ahlul Kitab. Ahlul Kitab are the Jews and the Christians. أَفَنَأْكُلُ فِي آنِيَتِهِمْ. Should we eat in their utensils? قال لا تأكلوا فيها. He said, don't eat in them. إلا ألا تجدوا غيرها. Unless you don't find anything other than it. فَاغْسِلُوهَا وَكُلُوا فِيهَا. Then wash it and eat from it. متفق عليه. متفق عليه. This is the first hadith. The second hadith عن عمران بن حسين رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه توضأوا من مزادة امرأة مشركة. متفق عليه. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and his companions performed wudu from an animal hide water container belonging to a polytheist woman. Okay, belonging to a polytheist woman. So these two hadith are varying in terms of the ruling. One says, don't eat or drink from their utensils. And in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ and the companions used the utensils of a non-Muslim woman. This is why many of the fuqaha, and this is what Ibn Qudama mentioned also in Al-Umdah, what is the general principle with regards to eating from plates and cups and spoons and so on of non-Muslims? The general principle of a plate, is it tahir or najis? Tahir. A plate generally is tahir. That's the standard position. Whether it belongs to a Muslim or not. Yeah? Whether it belongs to a Muslim or not. Because is the impurity of a Muslim, of a non-Muslim, physical or spiritual? Spiritual. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ. The polytheists are najas, impure, not physically. Not physically impure. Otherwise, how can a man marry a Christian woman and have children with her and she's impure? It doesn't work. Okay, so the impurity is spiritual impurity, not physical. Therefore, this command here is a command to be careful, a command to ensure that you know how these plates and so on are being used. Or it's, as some scholars say, it's a command of recommendation. It's mustahab. If we only had the first hadith, then this would be what? Wajib, yeah? Following that command is wajib. He says, لا تأكلوا فيها. Don't eat from it. Unless you don't find anything other than it. Then wash it and then eat from it. If you don't find anything. Had we not had the following hadith which explained this narration, then we would have had to say this is haram. To eat from the plates and spoons or cups of non-Muslims is haram. Unless you don't find anything, in which case you wash it and then use it. Okay, so that's merely a recommendation. Based on that, a person attends a restaurant and they use plates and cups. Alhamdulillah, in Birmingham we only really eat at Muslim restaurants, but elsewhere in the UK or in other parts of the world, where that's not the case, plates and cups and so on and forks and spoons are provided. What's our obligation here? Do we ask them and say, is it tahir or najis? What's the obligation? Nothing. Why? Because are they going to give you plates or cups that are already used?
No.
They're going to wash them. This is without doubt. And impurity, najasa, is this something that is understood, that has a wisdom and reasoning that we can understand? Or is it something that's beyond our understanding, like tawaf, for example, the tawaf around the Kaaba? Is there a specific illah that is understood with regards to tawaf? In terms of wisdom. Such that if that wisdom doesn't exist, therefore tawaf is no longer wajib. For example, one of the benefits of salah is to come closer to Allah. If you don't come closer to Allah, salah is not wajib anymore. Can that be said about salah? No, of course not. Of course it can be said. Salah is wajib all the time. Whereas something like impurity, which has something, the fuqaha call it ma'qul al-ma'na, something which is understood. The meaning of it is understood. It's an impurity. What's the aim of the impurity and washing it?
Pure.
Just to get rid of it, that's it. It's to get rid of it. Washing an impurity, the aim of it is to get rid of it. So whether it's washed by the rain, or a non-Muslim, or a boy, or a man, or a woman, does it matter? It doesn't matter. Okay, because the whole point here is to wash that thing. These plates have been washed, therefore, problem is over. We look confused. It's clear, eh? It is clear. So the washing of an impurity has a meaning which is understood, and the meaning of it is to get rid of that impurity. Get rid of that impurity. It's not purely an act of worship. It's not purely an act of worship, generally speaking. It has a meaning. The meaning is to get rid of that impurity. It's been gotten rid of by the restaurant. Can we now eat in it? Alhamdulillah, we can eat in it. It's pure. Okay. And Anas ibn Malik, the same applies to clothing of non-Muslims. Their clothing, their plates, their cups, their houses, their sofas, whatever else. All of that, the asl is that it's tahir, that it's pure and can be used. And we don't say every time you buy clothes from a non-Muslim you wash it. And then, no, it's tahir. Unless you're certain that it's used in a way which makes it najis. In which case, it's wajib to wash. Otherwise it's merely, otherwise you merely stick to the asl, which is that the things are tahir. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه أن قدح النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم انكسر فاتخذ مكان الشعب سلسلة من فضة أخرجه البخاري. Anas says رضي الله عنه, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the cup of his صلى الله عليه وسلم broke. So he fixed it with a silver wire in a crack. Now, initially we said using gold and silver is what? It's prohibited. That's the general principle. And especially utensils. Especially utensils. Because the prohibition is to the letter. It's a literal prohibition in the hadith. Here he's replaced it with silver. And this is why the fuqaha make this an exception. The general prohibition remains, and this is an exception. If your cup or utensil requires fixing, that's the first condition. It's broken. You don't just add it for beautification. Oh, this silver will look nice around it. La, it's broken. It needs to be fixed. Secondly, it's a small amount, as was this case. Thirdly, it's a necessity. It's necessary for you to fix it with silver. Somebody can fix it with glass, or you can fix it with wood, or you can fix it with something else. Do you resort to silver? No. You can fix your tooth with something else. Do you resort to silver or gold? No. Okay. You can write with. Writing is never going to be a necessity, but any other kind of necessity which can be done with anything other than gold and silver. Do you use gold and silver? No. And gold and silver is a necessity. Is that clear? So this here, utensils, is an exception only, using a small amount of silver. Let's say it broke, and we only had gold to fix it with. Do we fix it with gold? No. We don't fix it with gold. You don't fix it with gold at all, because the exception is silver only. That's what most of the fuqaha say. Okay, we'll take some of the hadith of the next chapter. So long as things are understood in this chapter, everything's understood. So far we've taken utensils and the use of gold and silver. And we said the general principle is, it's a general prohibition. Name some of the scholars that said that it's a general prohibition. And it's not just food and drink. Because like we said, some scholars say, only food and drink, i.e. only utensils to eat and drink from, are haram. Eating and drinking from these utensils are haram. Just that. Because they say that's the hadith, nothing else is haram. Such as who? Who says this? La. Who says that everything's allowed? Sheikh bin Uthaymeen is one of the examples. The majority say, not just eating and drinking. Any use of utensils is not allowed. Any use of utensils is not allowed. Does this mean we can buy some utensils of gold and silver, place them on the windowsill as decoration? Can that be done? No, can't be done. Any use of it isn't allowed. And we said, Ibn al-Qayyim said, and no scholar doubts this ruling. No scholar doubts this ruling. Of course, that doesn't mean what other scholars say is batil, but it means that he considers this to be a far stronger opinion. Who else? Ibn al-Qayyim al-Buhuti, al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, who is from the Imams of the Madhab of Ahmed.
What was the name of the Hanafi scholar that you mentioned?
Ibn Nujayn, al-Hanafi. Also from the big muhaqqiqeen. Who's a muhaqqiq again?
Do tahqiq.
Yes, he does tahqiq. Barakallahu feek. Tahqiq means what?
Search.
More than search. It's translated as verification. He verifies. Some of the major scholars of tahqiq that we know are Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Sheikh al-Islam, Ibn Qudama and Ibn Taymi, both of them, and Ibn al-Qayyim, and al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, and Ibn Abidin from the Hanafis, and al-Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi from the Malikis, Ibn Abd al-Barr from the Malikis, These are scholars of tahqiq, scholars of what they call scholars of verification. They check the opinions, they verify the opinions. What are the varying opinions of the scholars? What's the sound? What's the unsound? And so on. Of course, they're just like other scholars. They're not infallible, just like other scholars. But in our time, they seem to be given extra emphasis, and this is why you hear more of the opinions of An-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar and Ibn Taymiyyah than you do of Sufyan al-Thawri, Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, Ishaq, and so on. Because these are from the scholars of tahqiq. Okay. So like we said, that's the majority opinion. So a person needs to avoid the use of gold and silver, generally speaking, except with regards to women. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam.